Have you ever tried to build the city of your dreams that just so happens to be on an island? If so, you've likely encountered a few challenges. Let's address those challenges and provide some constructive feedback to the team at Colossal Order to make remote builds more feasible and realistic in Cities Skylines II. If this is your first time to the channel, welcome. I'm Poplar Ponderosa. I make maps and build cities in Cities Skylines 1 and 2. This video was produced with contributions from some other really great creators. So, here's a big thank you to The Bus Stop, Piccana, Harbor Master J, Tigon Trollhammer, Sunny Scunny, $2.20, and City Planner Plays. Alright, let's get into it. First off, let's define a remote build. It's a town or city built in a location that does not have outside connections by highway, such as an island. This may also include maps that have outside connections by highway, but also feature a town that is too far from the mainland for realistic connections by bridges or tunnels. There are many communities around the world that can only be accessed by boat or plane, and there are many towns in Western North America that were built along a railroad. While making my most recently published map, Culebra, I discovered there are some significant challenges that made island maps unplayable without some major compromises, or mods, which we'll get into later. If you're interested in checking out the map, there will be links in the description to the functional version with tunnels and the broken version with only harbor connections. I initially tested the map using only passenger and cargo harbors as outside connections, and eventually compromised realism for playability by adding tunnels that connect to the edge of the map. These underground interchanges were inspired by Oceania by $2.20, one of my favorite Cities Skylines 1 maps. Speaking of $2, he actually tried to make a small island build in New Dollarton that was not connected to the rest of the city by road. The only connection to the island town was by harbor, which was connected to the outside connection. By the end of the episode, he had actually noticed a few vehicles had spawned on the island. I asked him about this, and apparently it was still a mystery how those vehicles got there. So, I tried to recreate this scenario by connecting an island town to an outside connection, and then later to the rest of the city, but by harbor. I waited a long time and never saw a single private vehicle spawn on the island, even when I made parking free and subsidized vehicle, commercial, and industrial zoning. If anyone understands this, please let me know in the comments. The best guess I have at the moment is that he was playing on an older build, and that was a bug that was since patched. Alright, back to custom maps. There are already lots of island maps on Paradox mods. Tunnels are featured on most of the island maps to make them functional. You can see an example of this approach in a series by Piccana at the start of their Bali High build. They try to hide the tunnels because it doesn't feel realistic. If you haven't seen it, I recommend checking out the build. It's beautiful. There will be a link in the description. Instead of using tunnels, some map makers just extend the island to the edge of the map and provide an outside connection by highway. One example of this is Samui Island by Palms Time. The map is beautiful, but the entire island is not within the buildable area. Now we know island maps technically work with tunnels, but I'm not totally satisfied with this situation. It lacks realism and feels a bit janky. In Cities Skylines 1, I was able to create an island map using only harbors for outside connections, even without mods, and it worked. But that was because of pocket cars. So I reached out to some creators that I mentioned earlier that I knew were interested in remote start builds. We have compiled the challenges we encountered and then came up with some potential solutions. Note that the following mainly focuses on island maps with harbor starts, but can also be applied to other remote builds that start by railways or even airports. Let's identify the challenges we have encountered. To do that, let's start a new game on an island map. I will choose Culebra, the harbor start version. The ship line tools are required to create connections from the passenger and cargo harbors to the outside connections. While seaways can be created in the map editor, the line tools are only available in-game after unlocking them with development points. This means that Unless you enable Unlock All or use the Historical Start mod by Algernon, you're stuck without a crucial tool needed for new cities to move into your city. The line tools are also required for connecting trains and planes. Once connected, citizens move into the city via ship, but very slowly. On average, I observe around 10 sims per ship, and sometimes even see 1 sim per ship, or none. This means that it takes a very long time for the population to grow, resulting in worker shortages and abandonment. One particularly frustrating challenge is the lack of private vehicle spawning on the island. City Skylines II does not have pocket cars like in City Skylines I, meaning that private vehicles don't magically appear when citizens need them. Only service vehicles like garbage trucks or fire engines spawn on the island. If you're trying to create a pedestrian paradise, this is almost fine, but not having vehicles severely limits the mobility of your citizens and impacts the overall functionality of your city. Not to mention your city will look like a ghost town, but maybe that's fine since all buildings will become abandoned anyway. One interesting thing to note is that if we check the cargo harbor, we can see that vehicles are being imported and stored at the harbor, and car dealerships can spawn in the commercial zones, but private vehicles don't spawn here. This is all merely a part of the economic simulation. On island maps, passenger and cargo harbors are essential for immigrating citizens and importing goods. However, the upkeep costs for the vanilla harbors are extremely high, making it tough to balance your budget, especially in the early game when revenue is low. The financial strain from maintaining these harbors can lead to bankruptcy before your city even gets off the ground. This forces players to enable Unlock All or Unlimited Money, which removes any challenge or fun through unlocking milestones. Additionally, these assets are way too large in scale to feel realistic. The cargo harbor is the size of a small town on its own. The new small assets that were released with the Detailers patch are awesome, and I appreciate that they were provided as an update to the base game. However, the size and upkeep of the service assets are still not appropriate for remote builds. The total upkeep of a full suite of services, medical, fire, police, education, death care, and garbage, makes balancing the budget very difficult, and I'm not even going to get into tile upkeep. Additionally, most of the assets are still too large. They require a lot of space, which is sometimes not available in remote builds. It often takes large areas of residential and commercial and industrial and office to generate enough taxes just to break even. Lastly, most city services can be imported or exported via outside connections. However, an outside connection by road is required to be able to trade some services. These include medical, fire, police, death care, and garbage. This issue is not game-breaking, but it can be a bit frustrating. Alright, now that's enough of the negative stuff. Let's move on. Now that we've identified our major challenges, let's explore some potential solutions so we can provide suggestions for Colossal Order to consider. Unlock the ship line tool at the start of a new game by default, or provide a toggle similar to Unlock All or Unlimited Money when setting up a new game. Let's call it the Remote Start toggle for now. This would be similar to the Historical Start mod and would allow players to still play through the milestones. It's also possible that the map maker would be required to identify the map as a remote build to automatically enable Remote Start, thus not requiring a toggle. Or the game itself could automatically recognize when starting a new game and enable Remote Start if the map does not have an outside connection by highway. The editor already has a checklist for what outside connections are provided, so perhaps this is the most elegant solution. This one is simple. Increase the rate at which people move in via ship, train, or plane with Remote Start enabled. Introduce a way for private vehicles to spawn on islands. There are a few potential solutions. Enable vehicle agent spawning from the cargo harbor or passenger harbor. This could be a feature that is only enabled with Historical Start. Or we could create a new car dealership asset that allows residents to purchase a vehicle. This would require a vehicle spawn location. or enable vehicles to travel to the island via car ferries. Ideally, this would be provided by a new car ferry terminal that is a separate asset from the one that receives cruise ships. Car ferries are a common mode of travel in many parts of the world, including some Nordic nations. Here are a few beautiful examples of car ferries in British Columbia, Canada. This would not only allow vehicles to come from an outside connection, but travel across water within the map without a bridge or tunnel. The car ferries could also transport larger industrial vehicles, service vehicles, or buses. Additionally, there could be a car rental upgrade at an airport, train station, or harbor that could allow tourists to spawn and despawn private vehicles. Lowering the upkeep costs for harbors in the early game could make island starts more viable. It would help players manage their budget more effectively and focus on growing their city instead of just surviving. However, the assets are still very large and the scale doesn't feel right for remote builds. It is possible to make your own assets in the editor and adjust the upkeep to make it more feasible. For example, Harbor Master J has created assets like this for this exact reason. Here we can see smaller passenger and cargo harbors which were featured in Piccana's Pacific Island series. These assets helped provide a little bit of additional realism as they were smaller in scale and had a more reasonable upkeep. Another similar example are some assets made by Tigon Trollhammer that were recently featured in a City Planner Plays episode of Magnolia County. You can see here that the smaller cargo train stations are a lot more reasonable in size and can even feature visible resource piles for each industry specialization. How amazing is that? So, introducing new small-scale assets could be a game changer for island maps. Consider adding small passenger and cargo harbors, as well as small airstrip and small cargo train stations. These would all need reasonable costs and upkeeps to avoid making the early game too difficult. These new assets could include upgrades to enable car spawning via a car dealership, car ferry terminal, or just more storage. In general, it seems it might be best to provide small harbor assets that can be expanded through upgrades as you need them. This may be a better solution than having several different size harbor assets with different capabilities. Adding even more small service assets with smaller footprints and reasonable upkeeps would reduce the service burden on the budget. These would also benefit small rural town builds. This isn't essential, but could complete the possibility of a remote build. Enable service trade via other methods. This may include imported medical, fire, police, and death care services via plane, ship, or helicopter. Helicopter might make the most sense, especially for fire. Garbage collection via service trade could also be enabled by ship. It could be an upgrade to a cargo harbor where a garbage truck would collect waste from the city and bring it back to the cargo harbor where it would be shipped to an outside connection. Before we wrap up, I think it's important to note that these solutions should not be part of a DLC, but are instead included as an update to the base game. This way, everyone can enjoy a more balanced and accessible island building experience. That being said, this topic seems to be within the theme of the Bridges and Ports DLC, so the release of any assets, code, or options that help with remote start builds would ideally be timed with the DLC. Lastly, I want to briefly mention a few ideas that we came up with that are not essential to make remote builds work, but would be great to eventually see in the game. The first was a marina asset with areas that provide boats to travel within. Multiple marinas within the same area could connect and provide an additional mode of travel. It could also have a recreational benefit to improve happiness. The next was a seaplane terminal for seaplanes to travel between islands, or even remote lakes. This would act like a form of expensive public transit. I really hope that some of these solutions can be implemented. I think remote start builds could be a popular playstyle and encourage some really creative maps and builds. I know there's already a lot of interest in small towns and island builds, so if anyone at Colossal Order is listening, please look into making this possible. It feels like we're already so close. This is a wonderful game, and I'm really looking forward to playing it for years to come. To everyone else, please let me know in the comments if you have any ideas, or if you think of any improvements to our solutions. Thanks for watching, and thanks again to the other creators that took time to contribute to this video. Take care everyone, and happy building.